You're simply the best. Better than all the rest. Better than anyone. Anyone I ever met.
So you're about to watch my methodology video, and what I forgot to include is part of my methodology is this. It's the reflective journals, and that's how I'm collecting data as well, is being reflective about my process through this dissertation journey, as well as the interview process of the participants that will participate in this study. Just thought I'd let you know. Enjoy. Welcome back. As I mentioned to you in the last section when I covered the literature review, that I was going to do methodology. And that will be our focus for today. And you can tell it's a little bit blurry because I am on Zoom. And the reason why I chose to do Zoom in this video reflection, so I can share my screen and show you what the methodology looks like for my particular research. So before we begin, I do want to emphasize, as I stated in the first video that I did with you, that I am not a part of this journey as far as when it comes to who the focus of this dissertation is about. I am simply an interviewer. I am interviewing these women's stories on how they define themselves as transformational leaders from a minority perspective. That minority also includes racial minority, religious minority, if they have a disability, and if they are a part of the LGBTQIA community. Without further ado, I am going to tell you what type of research I have. It is a basic qualitative research. A qualitative research is when you're analyzing words, you're analyzing themes, you're analyzing patterns. Different from a quantitative research in which you're analyzing using numerical data. Now, I will admit that the first part of my methodology does incorporate just a tad bit of quantitative data, and that's just getting initial information with the demographic profile, which I'll show you shortly. But first, let me just tell you that this is a basic qualitative research on how minority women in England define themselves as transformational leaders. I am focusing on just 2 research questions. My first question, which will be added here: how do underrepresented women leaders construct their story of being a head teacher in England? And the second one is, how do underrepresented women head teachers in England explain their experiences as transformational leaders? So that is my 2 focus questions that I hope that they will be able to answer based on using the same platform that I'm going over with you, Zoom. So how am I going to get these women to participate in my study? Let me share with you what I have planned. So I have 2 authors by the name of Vivian Porteet and Keziah Featherstone. They wrote 10% Braver. I'm actually going to show you their books that I have handy with me. So here's one of them. And so this is Vivian Porteet, and I said the name wrong, and Keziah Featherstone. And basically, this book focuses on women educational leaders from different backgrounds. They talk about their journeys as women educational leaders. Part of a bit of my dissertation and literature review was quoted from here. And so my goal is to reach out to these women because they also formed a Twitter network called #WomenEd. So I am going to reach out to them since they do reach out to different women leaders, and now they have spread worldwide, but they are based in England, and ask them to see if they can assist with me in recruiting the women to participate in my study. What they did as far as their organization is they were able to raise enough funds to provide graduate school opportunities for minority or women of color to enroll to become in higher positions in women leadership in the schools, and like head teachers or positions that are higher than head teachers, like executive head teacher or executive leadership role, just to give them that background. So the fact that they are working to recruit more women of color in their educational leadership platform is particularly in England, I think that's remarkable. There's also another network, which is a branch of hashtag women ed, and it's called the BAME network, and I am going to reach out to them as well. And the BAME network is an online resource tool that highlights women of color who are Black, Asian, or other ethnic minorities to collaborate, to support, to provide mentorship, to provide resources in England. So I wanted to show you how I am going to recruit, and those are the two areas I'm going to start with first. I am also going to use Twitter as my platform to recruit. I have identified, based on attending the hashtag Women Ed conference, women that I would love to interview in my study and reach out to them on Twitter that way as well. I'm also going to use social media's other platforms like Facebook and Instagram to recruit, to gain more for my research. So, how many women am I looking for? So, I'm looking between 4 to 7 women. I don't need that many. Be great if I could have it, but I don't have all summer, and I personally don't have the time. And I shouldn't say this, but I do have the time because I would love to hear all stories. But if I end up with 15, that will be that's a blessing. I will take 15. But I do want to ideally just try to do 4 to 7. Um, and just to gain different perspectives and different stories, because I could have, for instance, a white woman who is a member of the LGBTQIA plus, um, and she could share her experiences with her background as a head teacher. I could have a Black Muslim woman sharing her experiences as a religious minority or as a racial minority on defining herself as a transformational leader as a head teacher. So it will vary. Okay, what I'm going to share with you now is how am I recruiting. So I'm going to share my screen so that you can look. I'm going to pull this over here and see how I am going to recruit my members. This is taking just a bit. First of all, I am going to share my flyer. So this is the flyer that I'm going to be using to reach out to Vivian Porritt and Keziah Featherstone, as well as the members of the BAME Network, Education Network. So once I reach out to them and these women reach out to me, what happens next is I am going to provide them an email script to introduce myself, to let them know who I am, what the purpose of my research is, um, who's required to participate in this research, how long it will take, and what my research will consist of. And I haven't shared with you that yet, but I am. shortly, but I just wanted to show you how I'm recruiting. We're going to start with recruitment first. I've already told you what my research questions are that I'm focusing on as I'm interviewing these women in mind, and there are 2 of them. So as you can see on this email script, I am going to begin with like a less than 10-minute Google form, which is the demographic profile. That is the quantitative data I was referring to. Let me show you what that looks like. I have it up and ready for you. So once they agree to do this and they sign the consent form, then I'll begin by providing this demographic profile that we'll begin with. So basically, it's asking about their age, if they have children, because I do want to know if they're moms. I do want to know their marital status, their race and ethnicity. What is their sexual orientation? They can even choose not to answer this, but I'm trying to get as many minority representation as possible. If they belong to a religion minority or not, even if they're Christian and they're a woman of color, I will interview them because they qualify. Levels of education, numbers of years experience as a head teacher, the type of school that they're in, and the grade levels of the school that they represent. This data will form into a circle map just to show you the percentages of people who are represented in this, and just gives me an idea and also share when I do my findings who's participating in this research study. Now, I did mention about the consent form, so I'm going to go back into here and show you what that looks like. So once they have agreed to do this and say they want to be a part of it, and I am going to offer an incentive, it will be in the form of a Visa gift card, and it'll be converted into pounds for them for participation into this research. So they have a drawing and a chance to win that. And for them, I think it's about 37 pounds, but they have a drawing. They're going to be entering into that raffle to participate. And I'll have a video raffle that will go with it as a way of saying thank you. So here is a consent form. So basically, it's just telling them, introducing myself, providing them key information that you saw on the flyer as well as the email, letting them know the breakdown of my interview and what it all entails for them to participate in this. I am going to use the application Calendly to set up the time with them to schedule these interviews. I also will tell them how my information will be stored. Again, it is confidential. As I said, I am just an interviewer. I am not including my opinion. I am not agreeing or disagreeing with them in forms of that. It is their story, not mine. I have nothing to do with this. Even though I come from a racial background that is considered a minority, I have nothing to do with this. I live in the States. This is their story in England. How it will be presented, talk about privacy and confidentiality, how I plan to use this for future research and hoping to expand on my personal business with growth mindset services, my contact information, what their rights are, they sign and agree, and then we begin the interview process. And here is what you just saw, what the demographic looks like. So once they have signed that, I go right into the demographic profile. Then we schedule our interview. Before we schedule our interview, what I am going to give them is this interview profile so they can have protocol, so they can have an idea of the questions that I will be asking. And the type of questions I will be asking is considered semi-structured questions that will allow me to provide follow-up questions in relations of them being transformational leaders as head teachers. I will also provide them this cute little handout with pictures just to give them a description of what transformation leadership is. This is Aviello and Bass 4 components of transformational leadership that Burns, who developed the idea of transformational leadership, established back in 1978. But a few years down the line, Bass created 4 I's that are associated with transformational leadership. And we talked about this before. And we talked about the idolized influence, inspirational motivation, the intellectual stimulation, and the individual consideration, and a breakdown of what it all entails, just so that they can be prepared and have in mind how their leadership styles relate to the components, more than one or one, of transformational leadership and how they define themselves. And right here are the semi-structured probing questions I will use to interview them. Like, what strategies have you used to intellectually stimulate your staff? What kind of meaningful discussions did you have? When it comes to individualized consideration, job satisfaction, how does that influence your experiences as a head teacher? What are some inspirational, motivational ways that you guided your staff? How do you use idolized influence to impact your experiences as a head teacher? And so forth. If they provide more information, then I'll have follow-up probing questions as well. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Now that you know what my interview process will consist of, what happens after the interview has been completed, what am I going to do? So I am going to turn my computer around, and I am going to share with you how I am going to analyze my data. So in my bedroom, I have a wall of sticky notes. Okay. So after my interviews have been completed, I am going to categorize my information findings and put it into my wall sticky notes. But before I do that, these interviews will be conducted in a Zoom platform, and they will be recorded in a private cloud that only myself and my professor, Dr. Carrie Robinson, will have access to. Now, once they are recorded, the words that they say will be transcribed. I will look through each of the interviews that have been transcribed from the Zoom transcription, because sometimes Zoom does not pick up accurate words. Like mine, for instance, I end up talking too fast that my words get scrambled up, and I go back and look at through my transcriptions from what Zoom embedded and poured out, and it's nothing what I said at all. So what I do is I go through that transcription that has been downloaded, and I edit it. I edit what exactly was said. I go back and listen to the interview and edit exactly what was stated and what was said from me and the people that I interviewed. And then what I'm going to do is, once I have edited, I will do what you call a member check and send this to the person I interviewed, just to make sure that what they said was stated, and they send it back to me and say, yes, everything that was transcribed through our interviews was correct. This is exactly what I said. So that is what we call member checking. After that has been completed, I will compile this data, and then I have this wall. My wall is going to be bigger, by the way, but I just wanted to show you what I have started. So this wall here, I'm going to take some sticky notes. I'm going to cut and do all of everything they say and organize what form of transformational leadership they represent. I've already had the definitions here on my wall, and mind you, my wall will expand. It will cover probably this part of my whole bedroom that you see here. Once I have categorized and organized it manually, then I will look at patterns and themes and how it relates to the 4 components that Aviola and Bass have included. And it was circa 2002, by the way. Bass started in early 1980s, but I just needed to make that be known. And then I will use that as my findings. Another way that I can break down my data based on the transcript is using the MAXQDA. And that is optional. MAXQDA is a qualitative online software program that will help analyze your data. And it will highlight important words that have been repeated numerous times and can create and formulate a word cloud, or it will count the number of words that they have repeated. They may say experience. They may use the word motivation, encouragement. It highlights that to show what the trends, the patterns, the themes that I can come up with, and the categories in order to write up my findings and what I've learned. So that is another form that is optional that I could be using. But first, I am going to manually do this. That means take the transcriptions, put in their feedback, organize this on my board of what they said and how it relates to the 4 components of transformational leadership. And then from that, get into chapter 5 as a reflection and drawing conclusions. So chapter 4 is my findings. Chapter 5 are my conclusions. So now that I've covered the first 3 chapters, I've covered the introduction, which is the overview. Second chapter is the literature review. This is the methodology part. Now I am just waiting for the approval. Please pray for me. For the proposal that I had to resubmit and start all over again. Once that's approved, I have to go through the IRB process. What is IRB? It is the internal review board. Before I can interview these women, it has to be approved by a group of members from my university to make sure that it is appropriate to conduct this research. Once that's approved, then I can interview these women. I can go ahead. First, I'm going to go ahead and start recruiting to find participants in my research study to be able to interview these women. Well, this will be my last video before we go to the proposal and RRB stage. My proposal and RRB video will be 2 videos in one. I am going to share my reaction, prayerfully, if I pass this proposal this time, and what the next steps will be. I'm also going to guide you through what it's like to do internal review board, also known as RRB process, because that could be a killer. That can also delay your process in finishing your dissertation, because they have to approve if it's worthy. When it comes to the IRB, when you're dealing with children, it does take a longer time, and you have to come up with more explanation why you need to interview children. But in my situation, I hope I pass. I'm interviewing adults, so it shouldn't be a problem. And adults that are living in England. So this is not a comparative study, because it's dealing with someone in another country from an American perspective. This is just a study based in England. We just happen to do it in Zoom. It is cheaper, less cost efficient. We are still towards the end of what we call a pandemic turning into an endemic. But with this basic qualitative research study, we are going to ensure that this IRB will be approved. So until next time, I am signing off. Looking forward to seeing you again. Can't wait to share with you the good news. I passed my proposal. I'm speaking that into existence right now. And I passed my IRB. Yay.
Who's that sexy thing I see over there?